Welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Derek Chauvin deserves a new trial. I'm going to be talking about that today. For one, the location of his trial. His attorney argues that they argued that the Minnesota courts violated Chauvin's right to a fair trial under the Sixth Amendment by refusing to transfer his trial to a location which was not affected by the George Floyd riots. That's number one. Number two, if the jurors acquitted Mr. Chauvin, they knew that they would be bracing for more riots in their own neighborhoods or personal harm to themselves. And then three, the effects that George Floyd riots and the Derek Chauvin trial has had on Minnesota has actually led to depolicing and more crime against blacks. His attorneys, Derek Chauvin's, wants to take this before the Supreme Court. I hope they do. I hope they get before the Supreme Court, and I hope they win. And I hope Derek Chauvin gets out of jail. No, that's controversial, but we're going to be talking about it here. All right, welcome to the Carl Jackson Show podcast. Again, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Guys, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. We're on YouTube and Rumble. Subscribe, rate, review there. Share it with your friends. Por favor. All things social media at The Carl Jackson Show. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Truth Social, Getter, Facebook, wherever I am. The Carl Jackson Show. And today's show is brought to you in part by MyPillow.com. Mike Lindell at MyPillow.com has provided he's a fabulous sponsor for us. He's part of the reason why we are able to podcast. Please, right now there are a plethora of deals available to you. All you have to do is go to mypillow.com, click on the radio podcast square, and enter my name, Carl, C-A-R-L, to take advantage of all of the deals. Giza Dream Sheets, My Pillow 2.0, My Slippers, dog beds, you name it. Or give them a call, 800-858-0263. Christmas is just around the corner. It's a good time to start shopping now, especially with the deep discounts. Over 60% off in some cases. So check them out, mypillow.com. All right. Now, guys, let me read to you this. Amendment number 6. Now, this seems to be a controversial topic. It isn't, in my opinion. Gabe is sitting behind me. And by the way, I got to say, guys, I'm sorry. We are undergoing a studio transformation. So if it looks crappy right now, that's because it is. It's a work in progress. And it's all Gabe's fault. So just so you know, I have nothing to do with, no, but seriously, it is a work in progress. We didn't record yesterday because just a bunch of crazy stuff going on. All right. So if you see a screen behind me now, there's some lighting issues. We're working on all that. So just so you know, it's going to look a little differently today, but it is what it is. All right. Now, let me get back to the topic at hand. Let me read to you the Sixth Amendment. Now, I think Gabe disagrees with me. Can I get a hand up if you disagree with me on this particular topic, Gabe? I think that Derek Chauvin should be released. You disagree. Okay, so, whoops. So Gabe disagrees. It's okay. Gabe can be wrong. So the Sixth Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy trial and speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation, to be confronted with the witnesses against him, to have compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Carl, why are you even bringing this up now? This case is said and done. They've locked away Derek Chauvin. They've thrown away the key. This guy's a racist, a bigot, so on, etc. All the stuff that we were told about. Guys, we all know that Black Lives Matter is a fraud today, right? We all know what was going on a couple of years ago. We saw riots across the country, particularly in blue cities where property was destroyed. You're talking about approximately $2 billion worth of insurance claims paid out due to property damage caused by the George Floyd riots. Now, here's what's happening. Derek Chauvin and his attorneys are trying to get before the Supreme Court to appeal his conviction. This is from the Daily Wire. Here's a summary. So attorneys for former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin have filed a petition asking the Supreme Court to hear an appeal to the highly publicized case concerning the death of George Floyd. The article says the High Court this past summer declined to hear the case, and I hope they will change their mind. So Chauvin was sentenced by Judge Peter Cahill. I'll get into that in just a second. Back in 2021, he was sentenced to 22 and a half years. I'm sitting here in Orlando. Derek Chauvin, I didn't realize this. I don't know that anyone realized this before the trial took place. Apparently had a property several miles from me, but right here in the Central Florida area, a condo that people were out in front of protesting. I had no idea at the time. So that's 270 months after a jury found the former officer guilty of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and also second-degree manslaughter in George Floyd's death. Now, we all saw the pictures and the video, and it looked absolutely horrible. You had even conservatives opining and commentating or offering their commentary or their opinion on, oh my God, Derek Chauvin should have got off of George Floyd's neck. That's the way that you would often hear it. He shouldn't have been on his neck that entire time. And I agree that he shouldn't have been on his back that entire time. But I never saw Derek Chauvin on George Floyd's neck. And I challenge you to go back and watch the video of his knee placement. And then I challenge you, because some of his fellow officers sold him out. I'm not saying this isn't an argument as to whether or not Derek Chauvin is a racist or a good guy. I don't know. But I do know this. He's in jail for a crime that he didn't commit. I went back at the time and I watched video of training on how to handle suspects that were, they would worry about if suspects were on drugs, they would either black out and pop back up, wake up real quickly or whatever. Or, they would go, whatever it was some type of weird training, but it had to do specifically with people that were on drugs that would come to, and they would freak out, and they would end up having a heart attack because they would, freak out. I forget what it was, what it's called. But I watched the video of the training. I'm not even sure you can find that online. And I got to be honest with you, I didn't search this morning because we were working around in the studio here. But nonetheless, there was specific training where they were shown to do the exact hold that that Derek Chauvin placed on George Floyd. Another thing you guys might remember, we all remember the video of Derek Chauvin on George Floyd's back, granted near his neck, but on his back, shoulder blade area. But also, you guys might not recall, because we didn't see it until way later, until the populace, had already made their decision. We didn't see the video of George Floyd being a nuisance before, earlier on in that confrontation with police officers before Derek Chauvin had shown up. He had already said that he couldn't breathe before Derek Chauvin ever arrived on the scenes. He had the other police officers that literally set him off to the side, and he was almost like having a panic attack. He was a big dude getting inside of his SUV, and then he started saying he couldn't breathe. And it was the weirdest thing. It was like they were trying to calm him down. They dealt with him for several minutes. It was a long time. It's not like this happened, within a matter or a span of a couple of minutes or a few minutes. Where Derek Chauvin came on the scene, the other police officers had been handling him for a long time. And he had already, again, mentioned to them that he could not breathe. Why couldn't he breathe? We'll get to that in just a second, but I suspect you know. Just like the jurors know. I'm going to share with you new information that's actually old information that I knew about at the time based upon hearing some of the jury trial. Or reading, I don't even remember at this point, hearing it or either reading part of it with a witness that I thought was absolutely damaging. Matt Walsh from the Daily Wire writes about it, and I'll get to that in just a second because the evidence the guy should be out. But let me give you the first instance as to why Derek Chauvin needs to be out of prison, needs to be released, in my opinion. And by the way, Chauvin's attorneys, one of them is named William Moorman. He believes that their appeal has nationwide significance. I do as well. And he notes the several reasons why he believes that Derek Chauvin did not get a fair trial. And I believe that he's absolutely right. First off, let me say this. I read the Sixth Amendment. Yeah, I did. All right. A lot of people don't understand this. Actually, let me just get to the reason, and then I'll break this down. The first reason why he believes Derek Chauvin should have another trial is, he said specifically, and I'm quoting Moorman, one of the attorneys for Derek Chauvin. He says, "We argued the Minnesota courts violated Mr. Chauvin's right to a fair trial under the Sixth Amendment, which I read to you, by refusing to transfer his trial to a location in Minnesota which was not affected by the George Floyd riots." And I think he's absolutely correct in that. There is no way you were going to get a fair trial during the summer of love, quote unquote, where they were having riots, and that was the epicenter, right, of the rioting in Minnesota. There's no way Derek Chauvin would get a fair trial there, and anyone that's an honest broker would admit to that at the very least. Number two. Now, and let me say this: why is that important, guys? Listen, the law isn't what you feel it should be. The law is what it is. And if any one of you were ever to step inside of a courtroom, you would hope that you would be judged by a jury of your peers based upon the law, not based upon how, what they feel, what you think, but it should be strictly based upon evidence. That's why I say if I get in trouble with the law, I do not want a jury trial. Lord willing, I never will anymore. All right. But I do not want a jury trial. And I don't want a bench trial if it's a woke judge. So I would always say that I wanted a bench trial, but now there's so many woke judges. That kind of scares me. But I definitely know I don't want a jury trial because I don't believe that most Americans understand what a jury trial is supposed to be about. All right. It is the prosecutor's job to go into the courtroom and convince you that a crime has been committed without a reasonable doubt. If there's a reasonable doubt in your mind, that person should not go to jail. Well, what if that person is guilty? We don't want that person getting away. That's where my faith comes in. God is going to have to deal with that. But that's not our system. And the fact is, I think too many people believe that that's our system. And that's what happened to Derek Chauvin. I don't care how you feel about him. I don't care if he's a racist or not. I don't care if he said, I'm talking about the rule of law. If you want the rule of law to be applied equally, and I don't know that he's a racist. I don't, honestly, from what I understand, he's had no problem with race, or he had no problems with race issues with his colleagues that he worked with. All right. That was my understanding. So you had all these riots that broke out in 2020, $2 billion worth of property damage done. All right. And so there was no way the guy was going to get a fair trial. Secondly, the second reason why Chauvin should be able to walk, in my opinion, or at least deserves to go before the Supreme Court, and he deserves another trial, is his attorney writes about it, and he quotes, and I quote, "If the jurors acquitted Mr. Chauvin, they would have been bracing for a resumption of riots in their own community and possible threats to their own safety, which virtually," listen to this, "all the jurors expressed when questioned by the attorneys prior to the trial." They knew going in, based upon all of the jury screening that they had done, that there was no way that Derek Chauvin was going to get a fair trial, and yet the judge would not allow them to change venues. Because virtually every single juror that they witness, and they get to do that, both the prosecution and the defendant, both they get to interview the jurors to see if they can be fair. And all of them, almost all of them, expressed, again, when questioned by the attorneys, that they were fearful of more rioting and they were fearful for their personal safety if they didn't come up with a guilty verdict. So at that point, guys, it didn't matter what the jury heard. They were going to find a reason to convict this guy. Well, I don't care. There's been a lot of black people that have been done wrong in the justice system. Shut up. There will be a lot more because of this trial. A lot more. The Supreme Court precedent provides that such cases should presumptively be transferred without any finding of actual juror bias. In other words, the bias is presumed. All right, so that's what his attorney is arguing. So that's the second reason. You had a biased jury. The trial should have never happened in the heart of in the heart of Minnesota, or in Minnesota at all, or Minneapolis or wherever. And then also the number three reason, and I thought this was a bit of a stretch, but the more I read into this, it makes sense. It's depolicing, right? See, here's what a lot of people don't understand, and you may see this happening now. As a result of this particular trial, there's been depolicing across the nation. Carl, what do you mean by depolicing? There's been a lot of police officers, good ones, and I'm not saying they're all good. There's always going to be some apples that ruin the bunch. I absolutely get that. But for the vast majority of police officers, I believe, are good, decent people that go to work every day and just want to do their job and come home safely to be with their families. Here's the depolicing issue. After this situation happened, there was a drop in police officers, and it has continued to fall, applying for jobs. People don't want to be police officers. Also, they would depolice. White officers, particularly when they would go to urban communities. Heather McDonald has done research on this extensively. All right, so when they would go to black communities, they decided to stop policing because they were more fearful of losing their job. So crimes or petty crimes that they would have picked up on in the past, they don't even bother with unless they literally see a violent crime of sorts happening right before their eyes. Instead of policing the streets, they just decided to hey, unless I get a call, I'm not bothering, because I don't want to risk my career, and I don't want to risk going to jail for the rest of my life because I'm a white cop. I arrest a black criminal, and then I have to restrain him in some way, shape, or form that doesn't look good on camera. And then the next thing you know, I'm sitting in a prison cell for 30 years of my life. Who wants to become a cop after that? Nobody in their right mind. Now, let me give you some more evidence. And this is evidence, quite frankly, that I knew at the beginning, and I heard at the trial, and I read at the time. During the trial, Chauvin's attorney, another attorney, Eric Nelson, argued, one, that Floyd's drug use, and he had a heavy drug use, and he had a bad heart. They were crucial factors in his death, and that Chauvin used reasonable force through an authorized prone hold. That's what Chauvin was doing. That's called a prone hold. He was trained to do that hold. And I watched his supervisors throw him under the bus. Why? You don't think they were fearful of their own lives? Their family safety? Their careers? I watched the training video where they were shown Minneapolis police officers to do exactly what Derek Chauvin did. And again, I forget the name of the condition when somebody is on drugs, they black out, and then all of a sudden they come back, and then they just want to scrap with cops or whomever. They don't know what the hell is going on. That's what he was doing. Did he stay on there too long? Should they have it? Yeah, we can all question those things. I get it. But you're not trying to murder a guy by using procedures you were trained to use. This guy was thrown in jail because George Floyd rioters wanted a piece of flesh, and they got it. So George Floyd was a heavy drug user. He had a bad heart. I believe it was an enlarged heart. And Chauvin, again, used the prone hold. The Hennepin County medical examiner revealed that Floyd's autopsy showed the deceased had potentially lethal levels of drugs in his system. Now, let me just take you through some of what Matt Walsh wrote about in a column of his that provides some of this newer information. Hopefully I have this bad boy up. So let me just read through it, because there are some people, including the medical examiner, that basically he testified truthfully, but he could have been a lot more. He could have been a lot more forceful about it. So let me just bring in some of these characters, and based upon their testimony, frankly, Derek Chauvin should have walked. In a normal setting during normal times, I don't think Derek Chauvin would be in jail. Matt Walsh talks about the testimony of the chief medical examiner in Minneapolis. It's a guy by the name, of Andrew Baker. So it says, a little over a week into the trial, he was called by the state to make the claim that Derek Chauvin had committed a homicide by placing his knee on Floyd's neck for several minutes. And that's exactly what Andrew Baker did on direct examination. Direct examination being, that's the prosecution, that's the prosecution's witness. So the prosecution is asking him, what he thinks. Then, when Derek Chauvin's defense lawyer cross-examined Andrew Baker, it all fell apart. And this happened so much in a courtroom. Back in the day when I was doing stupid stuff, my attorneys would tell me everybody looks good on the courtroom until they're in the courtroom until they're cross-examined. So now, over the course of more than an hour, Chauvin's lawyer got Baker to admit a series of facts that taken together undermine the prosecution's entire theory of the case. For one thing, Baker, again, the chief medical examiner, admitted that just days after Floyd's death, he told prosecutors that Floyd had a lethal level of fentanyl in his system under normal circumstances. Meaning, if Derek Chauvin had not done that, it is very likely that George Floyd would have died anyway. All right. Baker also acknowledged that Floyd had a severely enlarged heart and that the autopsy showed no physical signs of neck injury or strangulation. The autopsy showed no physical signs of neck injury or strangulation. Do you guys remember the media covering this? Yeah, I didn't think so. The medical examiner went on to admit that if Floyd had been found alone in an apartment building, his death would have been certified as an overdose without a second thought. And again, I'm bringing this case up again because his attorneys are trying to take this case to the Supreme Court, and I hope they are granted that. Then Chauvin's lawyer delivered what should have been the kill shot, Matt Walsh writes. He asked Andrew Baker whether Derek Chauvin's knee had ever obstructed Floyd's airway. Here was the medical examiner's response. All right, so again, this is very important. He asked Andrew Baker, Chauvin's lawyer, Derek Chauvin's lawyer, he asked the chief medical examiner, Andrew Baker, whether Derek Chauvin's knee had ever obstructed Floyd's airway, his ability to breathe. Here's what the medical examiner said. Well, that seems relevant. The entire narrative, the medical examiner used the word narrative. The entire narrative surrounding the death of George Floyd up to this point was that Chauvin's knee blocked Floyd's airway. That was supposedly why he ran out of oxygen and stopped breathing. This is an expert witness. This is a prosecution witness. Was admitting under oath that Chauvin's knee did not affect George Floyd's airway. That's the medical examiner. The cross-examination received precisely zero media attention, Walsh writes. No one seemed to notice, but more than 2 years later, Andrew Baker is finally getting some scrutiny now because of a lawsuit filed by a former Minneapolis prosecutor named Amy Sweezy. So this is a prosecutor. As reported by Alpha News late last week and discussed on Friday by Tucker Carlson, Sweezy just claimed in a deposition that Baker, the chief medical examiner, privately acknowledged that there were, quote, no medical indications of asphyxia or strangulation, close quote, in Floyd's death. So this chief medical examiner told Sweezy, another prosecutor, basically, George Floyd didn't die because of Derek Chauvin. This is a prosecutor under oath trying to get the truth out. As she states in her deposition, guys, no attorney would do that. Put themselves in a deposition where you're sworn to truthful testimony. That he called me later in the day, this is what Sweezy said, on that Tuesday, and he told me that there were no medical findings that showed any injury to the vital structures of Mr. Floyd's neck. There were no medical indications of asphyxia or strangulation. According to Sweezy, quote, Dr. Baker said that if Mr. Floyd had been found dead in his home or anywhere else and there were no other contributing factors, he would conclude that it was an overdose death. For that reason, Sweezy said in her new deposition, Baker seemingly suggested to his colleagues that they needed to lie about Floyd's death due to public pressure. Quoting again from the deposition, Sweezy said, quote, he said to me, Amy, what happens when the actual evidence doesn't match up with the public narrative that everyone's already decided on? And then he said, this is the kind of case that ends careers, close quote. I won't go on because there's no need to. And you do need to know, though, however, that Judge Peter Cahill, he's a woke social justice warrior. The guy that sentenced the rest of the cops behind bars. He sentenced the Chinese guy, I believe his name is Tu Tao, to 5 years behind bars, a devout Christian, because he was manning the traffic at the time and didn't see everything that was going on. So just keep that in mind. Guys, listen, this guy deserves a new trial. It's as simple as that. I hope the trial makes it to the Supreme Court of the United States. And frankly, not because Derek Chauvin is a good guy, not because George Floyd was a bad guy and a criminal, but because the facts and the evidence should determine the outcome of cases. And for that reason, Derek Chauvin deserves a new trial, and he deserves to be free. Guys, I appreciate you tuning in to this edition of the Carl Jackson Show podcast, your daily dose of objective truth in a world of confusion and lies. Please subscribe to the podcast wherever you go to get your podcast. MyPillow.com, promo code Carl. Christmas is coming up, 10-year warranty, 60-day money-back guarantee. Find me on all things social media at The Carl Jackson Show. Until next time, don't grow weary doing good. God bless you.